If you're a married woman, or one day intending to get married, I need you to stop everything right now and listen carefully to what I'm about to say. This may be the most serious and urgent message you've ever received. What I'm going to tell you is not a story made up to entertain, but a real experience, lived by me, that changed my destiny and can change yours too. I've been to hell and seen with my own eyes what happens to many women who break their vows, dishonor their husbands, and destroy the home they promised to care for. What I saw is not something you forget, and I know God brought me back to warn before it's too late. You might think these things have nothing to do with you, that hell is for much worse people or for ancient stories. But the truth is, today, thousands of good women in the eyes of the world are walking towards eternal judgment without realizing it. I know this because I was among them, living as if nothing could touch me, until I was led to see the reality that awaited me if I continued on the same path. It doesn't matter if you go to church, if you sing in the choir, if you know verses by heart. What matters is what you experience inside your home, in your marriage, in the secret of your words and actions. This is what God showed me. Heaven and hell are not decided by appearances, but by the daily choices we make and the promises we keep or break. And when life ends, there is no going back to right what was done. So I implore you not to treat this message as just another video. Listen as if your soul depends on it, because maybe it does. What I saw is hard, it is painful, and it may shock you, but it may also save your eternal life. While there is still time, there is hope. But when time runs out, only eternity remains, with the consequences of our choices. Today you will hear details that are not easy to absorb. You will learn about the fate of women who used freedom as a weapon against their husbands, who exchanged fidelity for momentary pleasure, and who learned too late that God takes seriously every vow made before Him. I was on my way to becoming one of them until God decided to show me where I was going. If you have the courage to stay until the end, you'll understand why I say this message is a warning, but also an opportunity. And if God has allowed me to return to tell you, it's because He's still calling you to change before it's too late. Now take a deep breath and get ready, because what you're about to hear could change everything. My name is Helena. I'm 50 years old, and what I'm about to tell you here isn't easy for me. It's not something I share with pride, but with a heavy heart and a deep desire to prevent others from going through what I went through. I saw with my own eyes what happens to many married women after death. And it wasn't in heaven. It was in hell. I'm not talking about rumors or hazy dreams. I'm talking about a real, clear, and conscious experience that completely changed my life. Maybe you're married, maybe you're not yet, but if you ever want to be, I urge you, pay attention until the end. It could save your soul. I remember how I always considered myself a strong woman. I grew up in a home where my mother suffered in silence. I saw her being humiliated, disrespected, and even assaulted. From an early age, I made a promise to myself. I would never let a man order me around. This decision shaped my personality, and although I didn't realize it at the time, I was building a spiritual trap for my own life. When I got married, I brought this spirit of independence into my home, but it wasn't a healthy independence. It was pride, hardness, and a complete refusal to submit to or listen to my husband. At first, my husband was kind, patient, and affectionate. He didn't raise his voice, respected me, and sought my best interests. But my heart was already closed. I carried old wounds that I used as justification for not trusting him. I started talking to him in any way, disrespecting him in public and being proud of it. My friends and family called me a strong-willed woman, and I liked that image. Inside, however, there was a chasm that only grew wider. God's voice no longer found a place within me. Over time, I began seeking attention outside of my marriage. First, innocent conversations with other men. Then, dates, dinners, and finally, actual infidelity. I lied to my husband without remorse, stole money from him to spend on frivolous things, and worse, used my mistakes as proof that he wasn't man enough for me. Sin became routine, and I didn't even notice it anymore. I felt in control of everything, but the truth is, I was already a prisoner of something much bigger than myself. Everything changed one ordinary night. It was around 10 p.m., and I was lying next to my husband. He was asleep. I was awake, staring at the ceiling, when I felt something strange. A weakness came over me, and suddenly I realized I couldn't move my body. I felt as if my soul was being pulled out, slowly but surely, and an indescribable fear took hold of me. I wasn't dreaming. I was completely conscious, and within seconds, I left this world. I opened my eyes and found myself in a dark, suffocating place with a heat that seemed alive. The air was heavy, and I heard screams so deep they seemed to pierce my soul. Ahead of me, shadows with claws and eyes like embers moved silently, and I soon realized they were taking me somewhere. I tried to resist, but I had no strength. With each step, the sound of screams grew louder, and the heat seemed to burn from within. I knew deep down where I was going, and there was no turning back. With each step, the darkness seemed denser. I felt like I was descending, even though I couldn't see any stairs or floor. The heat was not like that of the sun or the fire of the earth. It was a living heat, which seemed to hate me. The creatures guiding me didn't speak, but I knew they understood exactly who I was and why I was there. My spiritual body felt like it weighed tons, and my feet touched rough ground, as if littered with shards of glass and sharp rocks. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. Only hot tears streamed down my face. As we walked on, I began to hear a different kind of crying. It wasn't just physical pain, it was pure despair mixed with regret. I would recognize that sound anywhere. It was the crying of women. The sound grew louder, until finally the vision opened before me. A vast, endless field filled with women bound in ways I could never have imagined. Some had chains on their arms, others had their tongues stretched out and tied to red-hot poles. There were also those whose feet bled as they were forced to walk over sharp stones. Suddenly, a voice entered my interior. It wasn't a sound I could hear with my ears, but something that spoke directly to my soul. This is the place reserved for married women who have betrayed, lied, dishonored, and destroyed the home they swore to protect. Those words cut through my spirit like blades. I tried to tell him it wasn't my place, that there were worse things in the world. But the voice knew more than I did. It knew every detail of my life, every thought, and every hidden action. I was pulled into an area where women were walking in circles on a floor covered in red-hot iron mixed with broken glass. They were crying, but they couldn't stop. When one fell, the ground itself would burst into flames and burn their legs until they got up again. The cycle never ended. The heat made the air shimmer, and I could see the skin opening and closing as if trying to regenerate itself, but never quite succeeding. It was a torment without respite, without relief. Beside me, I saw another row of women with their tongues extended, nailed to iron posts. Demons were slowly passing by, holding long, sharp blades, cutting their tongues from end to end. They screamed, but they couldn't pull their tongues back in. As soon as the cut closed, the process started again. I understood that these were the ones who used their words to humiliate and destroy their husbands, spreading lies and contempt within the home. Each cut was like an echo of the words they had once spoken. I was taken to another area where women were kneeling, with huge glowing sacks on their backs. Inside was live coal. The weight bent their spines until they nearly broke, and every few minutes a demon pushed further, causing the coal to burn deeper into their skin. The smell of burning flesh mingled with the weeping. The voice inside me said, "These carry the weight of stolen riches and dishonorably won comfort." I knew in that moment I was among them. When the voice spoke for the third time, I felt as if my heart was exposed. She revealed every lie, every betrayal, and every act of pride I had hidden, not just from others, but even from myself. There was no way to argue or justify it. Faced with this truth, my excuses of "I was hurt in the past" or "he deserved it" vanished like smoke. I knew then and there that my life had been a series of selfish choices wrapped in pride and rebellion. The voice continued. You mocked the role of wife, turned your home into a battlefield, and used your freedom as a weapon against the man who loved you. You broke vows made before me, and there was no true repentance while there was still time. The words were firm, but not shouted. Still, they hurt more than any physical wound. It was as if each sentence were an additional weight on my soul. I looked around and saw familiar faces, women from my town, neighbors, and even acquaintances from church. Some had been considered exemplary women in the community. The pain in their eyes was not just from the physical suffering, but from the shame of being there, knowing that eternity would not give them a second chance. It made me realize that many of us live a double life, appearing holy in public, rebellious and sinful at home. As I tried to process all of this, I felt a noose tighten around my chest, as if I were being dragged into participating in the punishments. Every step I took on those sharp stones seemed to cut not only my feet, but also my memories, and they all accused me. I saw flashes of moments when I disrespected my husband out of pure pride, occasions when I lied to cover up adultery, and times when I used words as weapons to hurt. Nothing was hidden. I wanted to ask for forgiveness, but I realized something frightening. There, regret brings no comfort, because the time to change has passed. It was as if my tears were weighed down and returned to me as proof that when I had the chance to choose good, I chose evil. This realization was more painful than any visible wound, and for the first time, I felt fear not of fire, but of eternal judgment. It was then that I understood that being there wasn't a mistake, nor a visit. I truly deserved that place, and the scariest thing was that if I had died that night, my soul would have remained in that prison forever. Realizing this broke something inside me that years of counseling and preaching had never touched. It was the naked truth, and it hurt more than anything I had ever experienced. As I walked across the burning ground, I realized that each step seemed to bring back memories of my life. Not random memories, but the very ones I was trying to forget. It was as if each sharp stone was a file being opened, revealing my hidden sins with cruel clarity. I remembered the first time I lied to my husband, saying I was going to visit my mother when, in fact, I was going to meet another man. I remembered the times I used my salary to treat myself while he struggled to pay the bills, justifying to myself that I deserved it. The physical pain in my feet was unbearable, but the pain of my conscience was even worse. I wanted to close my eyes and stop seeing, but there was no rest, neither for my eyes nor for my soul. With each memory, I felt more shame and more despair. It was as if hell had been shaped so that no one could be mistaken about their reason for being there. There was no room for thinking it was a mistake or God is being unfair. Everything was laid out so clearly that even the proudest person would be silent. I looked to the side and saw a woman I'd once admired at church. She always smiled, always served in ministry, but now she was kneeling with chains burning her skin. When our eyes met, there was no mutual judgment, only the understanding of two damned souls. This silent exchange hurt more than any physical wound. At one point, a demon stood before me. He didn't have the caricatured appearance seen in movies or cartoons. It was more frightening precisely because it was not completely monstrous. It had almost human features, but distorted, as if something holy had been irreversibly corrupted. He looked at me as if he knew every detail of my life. Without saying a word, he reached out and touched my shoulder. The moment he did so, I felt as if the entire weight of my sins were being placed on my shoulders, both physical and spiritual. My legs trembled, and I was forced to my knees. This weight wasn't just symbolic. I literally felt my spine bend and muscles tear. It felt like I was carrying not just sacks of coal, but every lie, every betrayal, every act of disrespect transformed into something solid, crushing my body. The more I tried to straighten myself, the more the weight increased, as if hell itself was telling me, "You chose this, now carry it forever." The powerlessness was total. There was no strength of your own, no outside help. You were alone with the consequences of your decisions. The voice that had spoken to me before returned. It didn't shout, it didn't accuse hysterically, it was calm but relentless. You thought submission was slavery, that respect was a sign of weakness. You used love as a bargaining chip and home as a battlefield. Here, every choice has a price, and yours is being paid now. Every word in that voice was like liquid fire pouring into my chest. I knew I couldn't respond because any defense would be a lie. And in that place, the lie died before it was even spoken. I looked up, trying to find any sign of light, but all I saw was a dead, heavy, motionless sky. There was no wind, no sound of life, only screams and the endless echo of pain. It was at that moment that I realized that if it weren't for God's mercy in bringing me back, that would be my eternity. The thought of never seeing anything good again, never hearing a genuine laugh again, never feeling peace again, tore me apart. I knew that if I got out of there alive, I would never be the same. As I was dragged to another section, I realized the torment there was even more specific. Women were placed in an endless line, each with their mouths open, while demons held their tongues taut with hooks. These tongues were attached to red-hot iron poles, and the heat caused the flesh to crackle and smoke. The smell was suffocating, a mixture of burning flesh and sulfur. Some wept silently, others screamed so loudly it echoed throughout the room, but nothing lessened the intensity of the punishment. I understood in that instant that I was in the place where words were judged, the words that destroyed homes, wounded hearts, and broke sacred promises. Every few minutes, a demon would slowly pass by, holding a long, sharp blade. He would slice their tongues open as their victims howled in agony. But, horribly, the tongue would grow back within seconds, and the process would start over again, endlessly. It was an eternal cycle, and each time the blade passed, not only the body suffered, but also the mind, for with it came the memory of words spoken in life. It was as if each cut was accompanied by an echo. Insults, lies, humiliations, all repeated in the head in a mental torment parallel to the physical. The voice spoke to me again, but this time it sounded even deeper. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. You used it to kill, not to heal. You hurt the very thing you promised to protect. The tongue that lied, that mocked, that destroyed, now reaps what it sowed. Each sentence seemed to drive a thorn deeper into my conscience. I tried to remember the times I'd used words of encouragement or love, but they were few compared to the amount of venom I'd unleashed against my husband. The shame was so deep, it felt like it was tearing pieces of my soul apart. I looked to the side and saw a woman I'd only known by sight, from the neighborhood. She'd always been sweet and kind in public, but now she was there, trapped like everyone else. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I realized that in hell, there are no masks. What you are before God is what you are eternally, without makeup, without reputation, without titles. Her suffering was identical to mine, because the criterion there was absolute truth, not the appearance we show to others. As a demon approached me with the blade, panic consumed me. I knew what was about to happen and wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. The icy blade touched my tongue, and the pain was so intense that my vision went black for a moment. There was no death to relieve me, only an automatic return to the starting position to suffer again. The humiliation was as great as the physical pain, because each cut reminded me that my words had been used to destroy, not to build up. As the torture continued, the voice spoke once more. There is no return here, no second chance. But you, Helena, are not dead yet. This is your warning. Take it seriously, because the next time you step foot here, it will be forever. These words struck me like a thunderbolt. It was as if God, in His mercy, was still giving me an opportunity. But I knew that door wouldn't stay open forever. Leaving that area, I was led to an even darker one. Women crawled on the ground, carrying huge sacks on their backs. These sacks were made of a thick, dark material, and a reddish glow emanated from within. The heat coming out of it was so strong that it burned not only his back, but also the air around him, making every breath painful. Some wept softly, others screamed for relief, but no one came to help them. Instead, demons approached to press their weight even further against them, driving the burning coals into their flesh. I quickly understood that those bags represented everything these women had stolen. Not just material possessions, but also peace, trust, and love. Every penny taken dishonestly, every benefit obtained through deceit, every time they took advantage of their husbands to satisfy selfish desires, it was all symbolized there, transformed into weight and fire. It didn't matter whether the theft was petty or justified. In God's judgment, it was theft, and it had an eternal price. A demon approached me with a sack. When he placed it on my back, the impact knocked me to my knees. The pain was instantaneous and total. The weight was so great that it seemed to crush my soul along with my body. I tried to stand, but the heat burned from the inside out, and each attempt to lift my torso only made the bag heavier. I heard the voice say, "You carried trivialities and vanities as if they were treasures. Now you bear the true weight of what you have done." As I crawled, I could feel the coals burning through my skin and into my bones. It felt like tiny explosions were going off in my back with every step. The smell of burning flesh and cloth mingled with the sound of cracking bones, and yet there was no death, no end. It was as if time had been ripped away from there, and everything was eternal. I began to think there was no chance of getting out of that place alive. I looked ahead and saw an endless line of women, all carrying the same bags. Some were so weak they could barely crawl, but they were forced to keep going. None of them could put down the weight, not even for a second. A demon that tried to alleviate the suffering simply did not exist. Everyone was there to ensure that the pain was constant. It was a perfect system of punishment, where guilt became the raw material for torment. The voice spoke once more, and this time there was greater gravity. Hell is not just fire. It is justice without mercy. While you live, there is a cross to bear and forgiveness to receive. Here, there is only the weight of what you chose. Remember that. Those words burned more than coal on my back, because they showed me that the life I still had was the only chance to escape that fate. Just when I thought I'd seen the worst, I was taken to a place that seemed different from the other sectors. The ground was dry and cracked, as if a river had flowed through there millennia ago and evaporated, leaving only deep fissures. The air smelled of mold mixed with old blood, and a thick fog covered everything, making it difficult to see. There were no constant screams here, but a heavy silence that seemed to crush my chest. As I walked, I realized that in the walls of that valley there were like invisible screens, and in them I began to see scenes from my life. They weren't random memories, they were crucial moments, decisions that changed the course of my life. I saw the first time I looked at another man with desire, even though I was already married. I saw the day I decided to hide money my husband had given me to pay bills and use it for myself. I saw every harsh word I chose, every gesture of contempt, every silent betrayal he never knew about. It was as if hell were a courtroom, and these memories were the irrefutable proof of my conviction. I tried to close my eyes, but I realized that even that wasn't possible. My eyelids simply wouldn't obey. What made it unbearable was not just reviewing what I did, but feeling the same emotions again as when I did it. When I saw myself humiliating my husband in public, I felt that poisonous pride again, and it sickened me because now I knew it came from a completely contaminated heart. Each memory wasn't just an image, but a complete immersion in the moment. I heard my own voice lying, felt the butterflies in my stomach before meeting a lover, and at the same time felt God's disappointed gaze upon me. It was a triple suffering. From the awareness of guilt, from the reliving of the act, and from the certainty of condemnation. In this valley, there were no visible demons, but I felt something watching everything, ensuring I wouldn't stray for a second from these memories. It was as if invisible forces controlled my body, forcing me to look and remain before these scenes. And to make matters worse, each memory was accompanied by a whisper. You chose this. You knew. You wanted it. Those words cut like blades, shattering any illusion that I had been a victim of circumstance. No, I had been the author of my own tragedies. At one point, I saw a memory that made me tremble more than all the others. It was a simple argument about something domestic. My husband was calm, trying to resolve the issue, but I was filled with pride and anger. I remember saying, "You don't rule me. I don't need you for anything." Hearing it again in the valley, I realized it wasn't just marital rebellion. It was a direct affront to the role God had established for marriage. Those words echoed so many times that they began to blend in with the screams I had heard in the other sectors. With each memory, I felt the weight of regret, but it didn't bring peace. It only increased the pain. Repentance there is not like it is on earth. Here, it is sterile. It does not produce forgiveness. It only feeds torment. And that was the cruelest part. The memory of what I could have done differently didn't come to give me hope, but to show me that the opportunity had passed forever. Time, something so abundant in life, was now a non-existent commodity, and this made each memory seem more suffocating. It was then that the voice spoke again, but this time with a deeper tone. Helena, you are still alive. This is the valley where many remain forever, reliving every wrong decision until eternity is over. I brought you here so you can see where your path ends if you don't change. Come back and no longer use your past as an excuse to continue sinning. Those words didn't ease the pain, but they lit a small flame of possibility within me. I knew that if I went back, I would have to change radically. And for the first time since I arrived there, I began to yearn to leave that place with all my might. I was pulled out of the valley of memories, and before I could breathe, I found myself in a long, narrow hallway. The walls were high and covered in inscriptions that glowed red, as if they were alive. As I got closer, I realized that these inscriptions were vows and promises people had made to God and broken. I recognized some of the phrases as those I spoke at the altar on my wedding day. I promise to be faithful in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. But now, those words held no beauty. They were flaming accusations against me. The hallway floor was made of a sticky, hot substance that stuck to my feet and seemed to pull me down with each step. I struggled forward and noticed that, at every door along the aisle, women were trapped, repeating over and over the vows they had broken, like a bitter echo of the day they had first spoken them. As I walked, I felt a different weight, not the physical weight of sacks of coal, but the moral and spiritual weight of having used sacred words so lightly. The voice spoke, "Marriage is more than a human contract. It is a covenant before me. Whoever breaks it out of rebellion and selfishness breaks not only with their spouse, but also with me." These words burned brighter than the fire in other areas because they showed me that my sin was not just against my husband, but against God himself. I passed a door where a woman repeated, weeping, "I promised to honor you, but I chose to humiliate you." The pain on her face was the same as I felt inside. At each door I passed, I heard different stories, but all with the same core: pride, betrayal, contempt, and broken trust. Some women were kneeling, their necks chained to the wall. Others held incandescent rings that burned their hands without destroying the metal. These covenants were like eternal witnesses to what they rejected. I looked at my own hands and saw that my wedding ring was there too, glowing like embers. The pain wasn't just in my body, but in my soul, as if every inch of my history was being exposed. Suddenly, the corridor closed behind me, and I realized there was no turning back. The only option was to keep going. The sound of the women repeating their vows grew louder, forming a sort of dirge that echoed throughout the room. Each voice seemed to enter my heart like a direct accusation. "You also promised. You also broke it." I had no way to defend myself because I knew it was true. The walls seemed to close in, and the heat increased with every step. Sweat streamed down my face, mixing with tears, and each drop felt like a testament to my guilt. When I finally reached the end of the hallway, I found a closed gate, filled with light so intense it hurt to look at. The voice spoke again. "These vows were made in my presence. I do not forget. But you still breathe, and as long as there is life, there is a chance for redemption. Do not use this chance to return to the same lies." The words echoed inside me like a hammer blow, and I knew that what I was being shown was not only condemnation, but also a final warning. This corridor was an eternal memorial to the promises I had broken, and seeing it left me more broken than any other punishment. I fell to my knees at the gate, exhausted, without the physical or emotional strength to continue. At that moment, I understood that hell was not only a place of fire and pain, but also of perfect memory, where every word and every deed echoes forever. This was more torturous than any physical injury. And even in that despair, a thought began to grow. If I got out of there, I would not only change my life, but I would do everything I could to warn other women before it was too late. As I passed through the gate to the Hall of Broken Oaths, I was thrust into a vast field lit only by a reddish light emanating from the ground itself. It was as if the ground itself were alive and pulsing, breathing hatred. The air was heavy, and each breath felt like it was tearing at my lungs. In the center of the field stood rows and rows of women, all with their faces held high, their expressions a mix of anger and despair. Their necks were bound by iron collars that glowed red-hot, and each time they tried to bow their heads in humility, the iron contracted, burning them until they screamed. The voice, which now seemed closer, said, "Here are those who have never bowed, neither before me nor before the truth." I understood instantly. This was the field of pride. As I walked among them, I noticed that they all had a proud posture, but their eyes betrayed endless pain. Pride, which in life seemed like strength, was now a chain that kept them standing against their will, burning without ceasing. Some tried to free themselves from their collars, but the more they pulled, the deeper the glowing metal penetrated their flesh. I recognized gestures that had once been mine, the look of contempt, the frown upon correction, the refusal to admit error. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected not one's physical appearance, but the essence of one's soul. In a corner, I saw a woman kneeling, desperately trying to lower her head, but the necklace burned so fiercely that chunks of skin and muscle were peeling away. She wept, but she couldn't stop resisting. The voice explained to me, "Pride is more than exalting yourself. It is refusing to be molded by me. Here, it becomes your own prison." These words hit me hard, because I knew I had often rejected God's correction, choosing instead to follow my own will. And now I saw clearly where that led. The field seemed endless. With every step, more women appeared, wearing the same necklaces and the same rigid posture. Some were young, some old, but they all shared the same fate. The heat of the metal in the air made my skin sting, even though I wasn't wearing a necklace. I felt like the environment itself wanted to remind me that if I went back to my life and didn't abandon my pride, that would be my place forever. This awareness was so heavy that I felt my legs tremble, not from physical pain, but from fear. I knew that to get out of there, I needed to admit something that I had never even told myself. I was proud, and it was killing me spiritually. As this thought formed, the voice spoke. "Acknowledging is not the end. Submitting is the beginning." That sentence was etched like fire in my mind. It was clear that it wasn't enough to be afraid of hell. I had to completely renounce the behavior that led me there. As I left that field, I looked back and saw the endless rows of women trapped by pride. The sound of their screams and the smell of burning flesh lingered within me. I knew this memory would haunt me for the rest of my life, not to condemn me, but to keep me alert. and I silently promised that if I ever had the chance to return, I would never again let pride direct my actions or words. Soon after, I was taken to a small, almost claustrophobic space. The walls were mirrored, but they didn't reflect my physical appearance. Instead, they showed my soul as it truly was, a tangle of wounds, dark spots, and heavy chains. It was impossible to look away. With every second, more images appeared on the surface, scenes of when I chose to hurt instead of forgive, when I lied to cover up my mistake, when I treated my husband like an enemy. There was no escape. It was me, naked before the truth. I tried to move away from one of the walls, but the floor seemed to move with me, pushing me ever closer to the reflection. It was as if the environment itself was saying, "Face it, don't run away." I saw the exact moment I chose to betray, and felt again the rush of adrenaline mixed with guilt. But now, unlike before, there was no pleasure, just the stark vision of how my soul deteriorated with each wrong decision. The voice came softer this time, but still firm. "This is the mirror that every man and woman will see before me. Here there is no spiritual makeup, no disguise. What you are is what appears." This statement cut me deep because I realized that many of the things I presented as virtues were actually a facade to hide rot. The charity I displayed to be seen, the humility that was merely convenience. It was all there, exposed. I began to cry and whispered to God to give me a second chance. But the voice answered, "You are not dead yet. This is for you to see now and decide. When the final day comes, there will be no choice, only consequence." The weight of those words left me breathless. It was as if an invisible door had opened before me, not for me to leave, but for me to understand that there was still a decision to be made while I was alive. The mirror continued to show me, but something changed. Instead of just seeing what I was, I began to see what I could be if I truly repented. I saw a healed version of myself, with marks that didn't condemn me but testified to God's grace. I understood that this image was not guaranteed, but a real possibility if I chose to radically change. This gave me a mixture of hope and fear. When the mirror finally went out and the walls turned black, I felt like something in me had been irreversibly broken. I didn't want to live the same way anymore, and even though I was still in that place of torment, I realized my heart was beginning to cry out, not just for deliverance, but for true transformation. After leaving the Hall of Mirrors, I felt like I was being taken to a place unlike any other. The path was narrow, lined with fiery precipices that stretched as far as the eye could see. The air was hot, but there were no visible flames. It was an invisible heat, as if it came from within the soul itself. On the horizon, I saw something like a vast gate, made of intertwined light and shadow. Each step toward it was heavy, as if opposing forces were trying to pull me back. I knew this was a border, not of hell, but of my destiny. The voice that had accompanied me throughout the journey was silent now, and this silence filled me with more apprehension than any cry of condemnation. As I approached the gate, I began to hear sounds coming from inside. Laughter, singing, and something that sounded like music, but with such pure harmony that my tears began to fall uncontrollably. It was a sound I hadn't heard in years, a sound that reminded me of moments of peace with God before sin drove me away. My legs trembled, not from pain or fear, but from the knowledge that I stood on a threshold between two eternities, and that there was still a chance to choose. Behind me, the screams and torments I had witnessed seemed to beckon me back, as if hell itself didn't want to lose a soul about to escape. Suddenly, I felt pressure on my back, like invisible hands trying to push me back. The weight was so real that my feet began to slide, bringing me closer to the precipice. I looked back and saw shadows moving quickly, with claws outstretched and eyes like embers. Instinct made me scream the name of Jesus with all my remaining strength. The instant I did, a wave of light shot out from the gate and struck the shadows, driving them back with screams that echoed like thunder. The voice spoke again, this time with a firmness that left no room for doubt. This is the point where many turn back because they don't want to pay the price of change. You've seen what awaits you if you stay the way you are. Now decide, life or death, heaven or hell. Each word reverberated within me as if written in fire on my heart. I knew I couldn't walk through that gate carrying pride, lies, and infidelity with me. They had to die before I could pass. I took a deep breath and, with trembling hands, began to declare aloud that I renounced each sin, name by name. I felt as if invisible chains were being ripped from me, one by one, burning as they loosened. The pain was intense, but at the same time liberating. Behind me, the screams of hell intensified, as if trying to drown out my resolve, but I continued until there was nothing left to confess. When I finished, the light from the gate intensified, and without me having to push, it began to slowly open. A gentle wind, the first I had felt since arriving here, touched my face, bringing with it an indescribable scent. I knew that if I took the next step, I would not only get out of there, but I would have the chance to come back to life and warn others about what I saw. I walked through the gate with my heart pounding, and the instant I did, the entire scene changed. The darkness, the stifling heat, and the screams were replaced by a soft light and a silence that wasn't empty, but full. I felt as if I were being carried by invisible arms, and the feeling was one of absolute safety. I looked down and realized my body was there, lying in bed next to my husband, just as it had been the night it all began. But now something was different. I was alive, and every beat of my heart was a reminder of the mercy I had just received. I sat up in bed with tears streaming down my face. My husband was still asleep, unaware that while he rested, I had walked the corridors of hell and reached the edge of eternity. I gently touched his face and silently asked for forgiveness, promising God and myself that I would never disrespect or betray him again. He knew that promise was not just a marital commitment, but a spiritual pact before God. I spent the next few hours in prayer, kneeling on the bedroom floor. The images of hell were still vivid in my mind. The women walking on sharp stones, the tongues tied and cut, the bags of coal burning their backs, the hall of broken oaths, the field of pride, the mirror of truth. All of this was etched into me like scars that would never fade, not to condemn me, but to remind me of what was at stake. I knew that my mission, from that moment on, was to tell as many women as possible what I had seen. The next morning, I shared the whole experience with my husband. He listened silently, his eyes welling up, and hugged me like never before. I felt that, in that embrace, God was beginning to restore something that I myself had destroyed. It wasn't just my marriage that was being healed, but my soul as well. I understood I had a long road ahead, but I was willing to walk every step of it in obedience and humility. Today, in sharing this testimony, I'm not seeking to shock or scare, though I know what I saw is terrifying. My goal is simple: warn before it's too late. If you, woman, are listening to this and know you've been disrespectful, cheating, or using words to destroy your home, understand that there's an eternal price to pay for these choices. But there's also forgiveness and restoration if you decide to change while there's still time. I went to hell and back, not to boast, but to say that Jesus still frees and transforms. If you're alive, there's still hope. But don't take this chance lightly. It could be your last. Today, I choose life, and I invite you to do the same, before the chains of pride and sin close in on you forever. If this message spoke to your heart, I ask that you don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with other women, families, and individuals who need to hear this warning before it's too late. There are many who walk the same path I did and don't know where it leads. Each share can be a seed planted in someone's life. It can be the warning that will prevent a soul from falling into the same abyss. Please also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. By doing so, you not only stay up to date with new messages, but you also become part of a group of people committed to spreading the truth and the Word of God. By subscribing, you help this work reach more people and bring warning and hope to places I might never be able to reach alone. Comment below what this message awakened in you. Your experience, your testimony, or even your question can be used by God to touch the hearts of others who read it. Often, a word from someone who has experienced something similar has more impact than we imagine. Don't put it off until tomorrow. Share, subscribe, and actively participate. This way, you'll be helping to keep alive this mission of alerting, edifying, and bringing back those who are straying from God. A message can change a life, but only if it reaches those who need it. And you can be the instrument God uses to make this happen.